Cacerio speaks, and this time he said more than he normally would, including an endorsement for Nick Caley and non-committal on Joe Mixon's future with the Texans.
You are Locked On Texans, your daily podcast on the Houston Texans. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Battle Red Nation, from H-Town to your town. Today's episode and every episode is for Texan fans all around. I'm your Texans credential media member and football analyst, John Hickman. We got a fun show for you lined up today. Joe Mixon's future is up in the air, according to Nick Cacerio. Don't know about the 2026 season and moving forward. And I got a response to that. Stick around to close out today's show. Hear my response. Ducking CJ Stroud's development question. Kim Davis, colleague of mine, asked a great question about CJ Stroud's development and the lack of resources put into that. And Nick Cacerio said, stick around for that. But I will say that he ducked the question. But he opened up, we're going to open up today's show, just talking about Nick Cacerio endorsing Nick Caley. He said some things that I think I agree with. I think we all should agree with. And I think when we get to the conversation, we'll just analyze it a little differently. It'll be unfair to move on from Nick Caley after one season. And I think that's a smart play. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Now let's hear from Nick Cacerio on Nick Caley.
Yeah, I would anticipate Nick being here next year. I think Nick learned a lot. First opportunity as a play caller. I'd say offensively, probably the last 2 to 3 months of the year, played pretty good football and did a lot of good things. So there was growth and improvement. There's always areas that we can improve and get better. And that's what, D'Amico mentioned the other day. Next couple weeks right after the season, was kind of looking at everything, go through, the coaching staff, go through other aspects of the staff. Is there anything that we have to do? All right, then we'll look at some things schematically, start to go through the self-scout, try to figure out, all right, what are some of the things that we did well? It's interesting. D'Amico started this when he got here. So the other side of the ball basically goes through and watches their respective sides. So like the defensive coaches will basically go through and watch an entire offensive season. Offensive coaches will watch the defense. And it's basically just for observations. Hey, through that lens, what do you see? Hey, what are some of the things that we did well? What are some of the things that cause problems? What are some of the things, this, maybe a little bit less of this, whether it's schematically, whether it's personnel-wise. And there's good communication. I think it's a great exercise. We didn't do anything like that in New England, but I think there's some teams that do that. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, we know kind of where we are as a team, and I think sometimes when you're working on one side of the ball, you maybe see it through one lens. Sometimes when you're on the opposite side of the ball, you see it through a different lens. And I'd say the rapport amongst the staff is really good, so we can communicate honestly and openly with each other. So it says a lot, and honestly, it speaks to who D'Amico is. So that's what we're going through right now. So, I would anticipate Nick being here, next year.
Nick will be back unless Nick Cacerio decided to say that to get out of the way of, if he is fired, it ain't on him. The perception won't be on Cacerio. It'll be on D'Amico. I'm not saying that's the case, but I'm just saying. But the simple fact is the improvements were evident and enough to bring Caley back. And also, this is what Houston signed up for last offseason, right? The first year in 2023, when you get this quarterback that you're looking to be a franchise quarterback, the first since Deshaun Watson, Houston opted then to pair him with a first-time inexperienced offensive coordinator. 2 off seasons later, when the league figures out the offense, and not only that, the offensive coordinator in Bobby Sloyd fails to figure out how to make adjustments, you fire him and you bring in yet another first-time inexperienced offensive coordinator. So number one, it'd be extremely unfair to Nick Caley, simply because, hey, the other guy got 2 years. Y'all gave him 2 years. At the very least, I got to get 2 years, right? And then this will also be extremely unfair to CJ Stroud. When we talk about development, you look at the first 3 years of his career and the potential of the first 4 years, which is why I'm against this. You're looking at 3 offensive coordinators in 4 years if Houston elects to move on from him. From a mental standpoint, from a football standpoint, that's just unfair to a young quarterback. It is. It was unfair when they did it the first time. It was extremely unfair the second time. And if it's a third time, that would be just outright insane, right? So they can't just fire anybody when things aren't going good. But the thing about it is, it was going good at one point. I mean, there were improvements, right? And I think the biggest improvement came when they figured out their best offensive line combination. Week 10, we see Trent Brown finally inserted into the roster, to the starting lineup at right tackle. Titus Howard goes over to left guard. That puts Howard next to Andrews and the rookie Ursary. Then those two start to play better with that staple next to them. And Trent Brown allowed for Ed Ingram, who played good football for the most part of this year, to be more comfortable on the side of him. So the offensive line combination that worked the best allowed for Houston to have their best and most productive offense. And once that happened, we saw a slight increase in points per game, 21.8 to 26.2 from week 10 all the way to the Pittsburgh Steelers game. Rushing yards per game went up from week 10 to the Pittsburgh Steelers game. Turnovers went down. Sacks went down, yards per game went down. And from week 1 to 9, this is pre-concussion from CJ Stroud, they had a 0.156 adjusted EPA. That was 13th. From week 13 to 18, that's when they get CJ Stroud back, they get a 1.77 adjusted EPA. That was 8th. So there were improvements from a quarterback perspective and offensive perspective. Also, we look at the combination of how the offense operated when CJ Stroud would use his legs to pick up yards, pre-concussion, post-concussion. That was a change there as well. And because of that, we saw CJ Stroud operate a little bit more from the pocket. And when he was able to do that outside of the playoffs game, we saw again the turnovers go down and CJ Stroud make those plays with his arm to the point where Nick Cacerio mentioned that they don't beat Kansas City without CJ Stroud, and that's true. But the fact remains is, hey, I am emphasizing the fact that Trent Brown insertion into the offensive line helped a lot. It cut down on the amount of constant chaos that happened around them. Houston's had, their problem going into week 10 without Trent Brown was the amount of negative plays that they, suffer from, whether that's running, sacks, or just plays not working out, going for 0 or negative yards. But then when the pieces were figured out from Nick Caley, the offense adjusted to it. Once he figured out what he had and how to work with it, then we saw the use of motion increase, the play action rate increase. On October 15th, D'Amico Ryan said our offense has evolved. That's why I like Caley and what he's been able to do, being able to go with what works best, what our guys do well, and finding that out and using it. And many of the adjustments stem from a coaching approach, in my opinion, aimed at simplifying things for his quarterback. Right? I talk about the play action rate, the motion increase. The shift was necessary because the system, along with Caley's coaching background, typically demanded more authority from the quarterback perspective. And I think that they view Stroud as not there yet. Not that he can't get there, not that he won't get there, but I don't think that they view him once the season went on as a player that can carry the entire load of the offense. So essentially, throughout the middle of the season, I think we saw Nick Caley's approach transition from a Patriot coaching strategy to more so of a Shanahan McVay style approach in just a matter of weeks. So he adjusted. He worked with, in a lot of ways, scraps compared to the other great offenses in the NFL, and he figured out a way to get the most with less. He's absolutely the guy moving forward, at least for another year. And again, you do not want to fire him. It'll be 3 offensive coordinators in 3 years. That'll be malpractice. And it'll be a development problem for their quarterback, which has been an issue for Stroud since entering the league, but more so a talking point in the last 24 hours. The NFL season is coming to an end, but there's still nothing like being at the game. The crowd noise, the energy, cheering alongside other fans, watching at home is great, but being in the stadium hits a little different. The frustrating part has always been getting tickets, waiting in queues, dealing with login screens, and watching prices change at checkout. That's why the Game Time app gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the hack for unlocking amazing NFL and NBA tickets and experiences in just a few taps. Seeing NFL and NBA tickets available for around $100 made it easy to plan a game day trip. And I really like the fees are included up front, so the price you see is exactly what you pay. Knowing tickets are backed by the Game Time guarantee gives you a real peace of mind. Take the guesswork out of buying NFL tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code Locked On NFL. That's LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code Locked On NFL for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today and get back to being there live. And also, Texas fans, perfect opportunity to let you guys know that Robinhood, they continue to grow. This time they're in the sports business. What if sports were traded like markets? Now you can put your sports IQ to work in real time with Robinhood prediction markets. It's not you against the house, it's you participating in a live market. You can buy or sell your positions live all game long. Use your sports knowledge in moments that matter. Robinhood prediction markets changes the game. It's people moving the action. So when momentum shifts, you can move with it. I always knew the game, but I never had a dynamic way to apply my knowledge. Now I can actually take part live in a market powered by the people. You're no longer just a spectator, play by play. You decide, trade every play with Robinhood, now available across the U.S. Download the Robinhood app now to begin. Continuing with this show today, first and foremost, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Texans your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the number one sports podcast network. Are you a everydayer from the Himalaya, and you want to take your Locked On Texans experience to the next level? Are you that guy? Are you that gal? Well, you can do that with the Everydayer Club. Get ad-free access to the show, and above all, a members-only Locked On Everydayer Club Discord server, which includes a group chat just for listeners of this show. This is where I'll start to pull from our weekly Ear to the Street segment to close out the show. Visit LockedOnTexans.supercast to get started and let me know what's on your mind. Now let's hear from Cacerio on CJ Stroud's development and if Houston is doing all they need for him.
Yeah, I mean, look, in the end, we're trying to do what's best for the team. Like, this program's not about one individual, so we're not building a team based on one person, one facet of anything. We're trying to look at the big picture.
I understand that, but I mean, that's an important part.
Yeah, it doesn't affect, how we look at the team. So what do we need to do to build the best team possible, put the best team together, and then give ourselves the opportunity to compete on a weekly basis, which we've certainly done that. We put ourselves in a good position. In the end, I'd say our shortcomings come down to execution. When you go back and look at the game the other day, can't turn the ball over 5 times. We control that. I'd say the 3 touchdowns that New England scored, we didn't play the coverage or the technique the right way on calls that we've done countless times. So in the end, we've proven that we could do it, but in games of that magnitude, the margins are as small as any, and you either make the plays and do the right thing or you don't. So in the end, and the players know that too, talking to some of the players on Monday, they know it. And when they're articulating it, that's what you want to see and that's what you want to hear, which tells you you're on the right track. So in the end, it's about the team. Let's build a good team. And in the end, get the best 53 guys. And like we talked about it in October, we talked about it before the season, whoever comes in this building, at some point, they're probably going to have to play. So, and that's where we try to build as much depth throughout the roster, because at some point we're going to need everybody. So this program's not about one person. It's not about one individual. It's, can we put the best team out there? Because in the end, the team that wins the Super Bowl is the best team. That's the truth.
No, guys, right now it is about one person. It is. It's about one person. At the very least, excuse me, it's about one side of the ball. It is. Now, I personally think Houston got it right with Nick Caley. That's just me. But when you say it's not about one person, then throughout the press conference, you mentioned the turnovers several times, right? When I say several times, I mean several times, right? Understands that there was poor execution Monday. Um, you mentioned amongst other things that just the guys know that, the players know that. I mean, the players know that, and the quarterback knows that. And he mentioned it several times in that press conference. That's some accountability from the general manager. That's what you want to see from your general manager as a message to your quarterback. But in comparison to that, the postseason performance was so bad that'll be talked about this entire offseason. But for Cacerio, he didn't answer the question. And the fact of the matter is, the answer to that is no. Right now, it is about one player. Right now, it is about putting the best around that one player. And it's not just a quarterback that has lacked development. I think it's an overall offensive development issue and also evaluation problem here in Houston. This is the first year since 2023, dating back to 2022, honestly, where it feels like the offensive line has made real progression through the coaching of Coach Pop. Ben McDaniels has been here since 2021, and he's been a passing game coordinator since 2022, I believe. And we have moments in 2025 where we're asking ourselves, why are we seeing more of this person over this person, Kirk over Noel? Why isn't Noel getting more opportunity? He's a third-round pick. Houston liked him a lot. What's going on? And maybe that ain't due to just offensive coordinating. Maybe that's due to Ben McDaniels and this being a part of the passing game coordinator and also the wide receiver coach. So is there a lack of choice there from the wide receiver to be in the spots that they are asking for that wide receiver? I think there's a problem there. We talked about a little bit on the development show on Wednesday, but that's a problem. Offensive development for Houston is a problem. D'Amico and his coaching staff have been able to coach up their guys. Kamara came into the league with a lot of question marks, and he's one of the better young cornerbacks in the league. Kalen Bullock's ascension from year one to year two. His development. Henry T's development as a fifth-round pick. What they've been able to do on the inside with guys like Tim Settle, like these guys are great players, not household names, somewhat of journeymen, but they developed them. On the offensive side of the ball, in 3 seasons, Houston has had a big problem. They failed to have players that impacted in 1 year come back. They failed to have impacted big playmakers on the offensive side come back for the following year outside of Dalton Schultz. Man, look what I'm saying. Trade for Joe Mixon, great in his first year. Ultimate eraser, nothing in 2025 due to the injury. Trade for Stephon Diggs. He's in New England now. The delegation of funds from the 2025 free agency cycle was incredibly preposterous. You go with Nick Chubbs over Dobbins, Gainwell, and Donald. In the midst of uncertainty at running back with the Joe Mixon situation, and just continue to trust in Dameon Pierce. That's a problem. And it ain't just you go with Nick Chubb over those other players. It's that you go with Nick Chubb over those other players in favor of Dameon Pierce, who hadn't had anything work out since his first year. Houston has a problem, and it has had a problem with holding on to players, unproductive players that they need to count on for too long on the offensive side of the ball. Electing to sign Thomason was a mistake, along with Cam Robinson. We didn't see much of Cam Robinson, and Houston got to pay that contract. I think that's about $15 million right there that it could have been used to retain Stephon Diggs. There has been a constant cycle where the approach seems like we got the coaching staff and we have a guy in the building. And everything else will figure itself out. Everything else will work out. Houston don't need just a guy. They need guys. They need guys. And your quarterback has shown you that when he has guys around him, dogs around him, he's a much better player. When he has a Tank out there and Nico at the same time, he's a much different quarterback. When he has Stephon Diggs out there with Tank or Stephon Diggs and Nico, he's a much different quarterback with Joe Mixon in the backfield to rely on. Stroud at this point in his career is not the eraser of offensive issues. And the lack of development and the lack of resources that Houston has poured onto the offensive side of the ball has been poor compared to other young quarterbacks in the NFL. You look at what the Bears did for Caleb Williams. You look at what Patrick Mahomes had in his, second year when he started. You look at what Stephon Diggs, who may just be the greatest quarterback developer and wide receiver in this decade, Josh Allen and what the Bills did. They traded for Stephon Diggs, and we saw the ascension from Allen. Right? Tua took him for Loa. He goes in Miami. They trade for Tyreek Hill. And that's the first 2 years. Like, this is what you have to do for a young quarterback. And Houston has failed to do that. I think it's been a revolving door of talent coming and talent leaving. The retool approach for the offense has been poor, and either they're not coming back, and there's also a consideration. You have to consider at least the lack of pure development from a coaching standpoint at certain positions on the offensive side of the ball. All of that has hindered in some ways CJ Stroud's development. Guys are leaving and not getting replaced. That is a problem. What's also a problem is what the future of Joe Mixon is going to look like with the Houston Texans. Will he be here? Will he not be here? We'll dive into that to close out the show. And that conversation will be spearheaded by the fact that Houston, this is a great running back free agency, and I don't think they need to mess around here and wait on Joe Mixon, right? But before we dive into that conversation, if you ever hire someone who looked good on paper but wasn't the right fit, you know how important it is that you don't do that again. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, trust Indeed sponsored jobs. Are you hiring? Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. Sponsored jobs boost your post to the people who are the best match for your role and that makes a real difference. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all of the boxes with less stress, less time, and more results. Using Indeed sponsored jobs, listeners of the show get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Terms and conditions apply. And also, ladies and gentlemen, it's tax season. No need to stress out this year. There's no need to have tax season take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax full service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert from start to finish without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 in all. And if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year, just file by February 28th. Taxes can be stressful, but take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Ladies and gentlemen, let's hear from Nick Cacerio on Joe Mixon's status.
Honestly, hard to answer that right now because we haven't really seen him in a little bit. So at some point, we'll see him. We'll probably get a better idea, maybe do some follow-up, examinations and get more information. Once we have more information, I think we'll better be able to make a better assessment, Chrissy.
Reason why you haven't seen him so much? All the other injured players were around the facility?
Actually, that's not correct. We've had some players that were here. We had some players that weren't here. So every player is their own situation. So at some point, we'll have an opportunity to visit with all of our players. And before the 26 offseason starts, at some point we'll have an idea where everybody stands. Go ahead, Landry.
Nick Caley also said that his medical condition never improved, and also he didn't jump off a building. He wasn't doing anything irresponsible. It was a freak thing, and I think that's a direct shot at the Joe Mixon shot himself in the foot rumors, which have gotten out of control, right? But on Joe Mixon's future, if we take a look at the 2026 free agent class, in the NFL. There are some names out there, and not only just names, right? I don't want to get caught up in just names, but there are some players out there that I think Houston could absolutely benefit from. First and foremost, I think their first responsibility needs to be making sure that offensive line is stout. Again, I go to what the Chicago Bears did for Caleb Williams this past offseason and how they retooled that offensive line. Houston needs to do the same. But I look at Javonte Williams, I look at Rico Dotto, and I look at Brees Hall. Rico Dotto sits at 6.5, Javonte Williams 7.3. Right? I think that there are some running backs out there Houston could absolutely benefit from in conjunction with the fact that Woody Marks made strides in his rookie year. But Joe Mixon's future with the Houston Texans, though he is under contract for one more season, I believe. Or maybe it's two, but he's under contract. It needs to be a chapter close in that book. Mixon's getting up in age, and this is why the uncertainty around the injury has led to Houston covering something up, regardless of what he says. And I think they do a good job of making sure that in-house information and problems or whatever it may be stays in-house. And from that perspective, I respect D'Amico Ryans as a head coach, right? He protects his players, and I think that allows for players to be open and honest with him, right? So I'm not mad at that. However, season has gone by, an off season has gone by, a season has gone by. We've seen Joe Mixon out with a boot on, and it was a freak thing. It never improved. It never improved. Can you bank on that? And my question is, why should Houston bank on that? Joe Mixon, when he retires, he's going to be known as a Bengal, right? He had a great first year with Houston, ultimate erasure of issues. But in the following year, and this is no disrespect to Joe Mixon, by the way, in the following season, the injury was so bad, didn't get a chance to see him around, the locker room or the facilities altogether. They kept it a secret, under wraps, didn't want to talk about it. Whenever it was brought up on multiple occasions, you saw pushback. It feels like that foot just ain't moving forward. It ain't healing. And anything that didn't work in 2025 offensively and has a uncertainty moving forward, I don't think Houston should bank on. That also includes another player that I'm a huge fan of, in Tank Dell. I think Houston needs to operate as if Tank Dell isn't coming back. And we know he is. Cacerio actually talked about Tank Dell coming back and that he's healthy and he's excited and ready to go. He tried to push it to come back towards the end of the year. It didn't work out. So we know that Dell is coming back, but we have to operate as if the 2025 season left us with Nico and Jane Higgins. Outside of that, there needs to be a retool and rehab approach at every position offensively. And in that is Joe Mixon's what happened to you in 2025 conversation. I don't think that this is something Houston should look at, like they did with Damian Pierce or Dario Gobuvale or Robert Woods. Like, whenever they held on to players past the time they were supposed to, this could be Houston's first opportunity to break away from that and say, you know what, Joe, we appreciate you, but we got to do what's best for our team right now. And they could not rely on him in 2025. And because they don't have uncertainty, because there is uncertainty moving forward for 2026, the reliability still is not there. This offseason, Houston should absolutely target a different running back. And they got guys out there that can make plays. Inexpensive guys. Dottle's only, 28. Javonte is probably the guy I like the most. And I can see Dallas trying their hardest to keep him. But Brees Hall. And with how Caserio works out deals, that could be a two or 3 year deal. nothing crazy, and a little bit more backloaded contract that allows for Houston to have flexibility in the first year or two to still improve the roster. And that'll allow for this season to go after Tyler Linderbaum or some of the other premium offensive line players that'll be free agents this year, however they want to look at it. But Joe Mixon's future for Houston should be, we can't trust that you'll be able to play for us anymore. So we have to do what's best for the team. And Nick Cacerio, it ain't just about one player. It's about the team, right? So you got to kind of take that approach with this Joe Mixon situation. Thank you for watching and listening to today's episode of the Locked On Texans podcast. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and comment on YouTube and wherever you listen to your podcast. And follow me on Twitter at John_Hickman12 and on Instagram at SomeSportsGuy. Until next time, ladies and gents, Texan fans across the nation, peace.